Hey, everyone. Happy Wednesday and welcome to the Hustle to Hero. This is where entrepreneurs journey through the reentry community, the veterans and the first responders. That's who the people that I'm going to be talking to. It's very, very much dear, darling to my heart. I am here with Tammy Scudder. Tammy, say hey to everybody.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kiley, for having me on board and for the invite. I'm looking forward to our conversation and just, enlightening everyone on what this journey looks like.
It is. And you and I met on LinkedIn, and I'm so happy that we did because our passions align. You've got an amazing program, and we're trying to get eyes on our programs. So, but you've got also a unique journey to a lot of people that are talking about this, the reentry community. Some of them, you've got a lot of perhaps people that are in the community, a bit in the industry. But Tammy, why don't you give us a little background on you and why this is a little bit unique?
So I've been in the corporate world, or was in the corporate world, for about 30 years. And I was accounting profession. And, I got caught up in a lot of drama and trauma in my life and mental health issues and concerns that I really had not taken the time to even recognize, much less get treatment for. And, all of that trauma and all of that drama and all of those expectations from myself, my family, society as a whole, my employer, being a mother, being a wife, a caregiver for, my ailing mother, all of that stuff just escalated into the perfect storm to where it was just too much. It was very overwhelming. Like, the expectation was unrealistic, but at the time, it wasn't something that I recognized. It wasn't something that I saw. It was just like, I can't continue to be this superhero to everyone. I can't continue to be this give all of me to everyone else and still be expected to function. It was just, and I don't think that that's just me. I think it happens to a lot of women in corporate world, if you're working outside the home. And I don't really believe that you see the impact that it has on your own well-being and mental health. I know I certainly didn't. So therefore, I didn't really know how to deal with it, or really how to reach out for help and ask for help, because, as a child, that wasn't my nature. I was to figure things out on my own, take care of myself, overcome things, and, and just figure it out on my own. So asking for help from anyone was quite honestly a failure, in my eyes.
So where you were kind of where you started down the wrong alley was almost mental health and self-awareness, and self-care.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as a kid, and I'm not, I'm not trying to put down my parents for what they did.
Of course
They
not.
did the best that they had, with what they knew and how they were raised. And, their goal was to raise children who were productive members of society and were good people. And they did that. Yeah, but they did it in a very authoritarian type of way, with a lot of structure, and really had their hands on us to make sure that we didn't go astray. And, that's great, because I don't think that I would be who I am today without that structure and without that kind of guidance. But at the same time, it really impacted me from a mental health perspective, because it taught me that I was not worthy of people listening to what my needs were. It taught me that I have to rely on myself to get the things that I need. And if I had to ask for help, to me, it was a failure of my own abilities. So you don't think about how those truly impact you and the issues that it causes until you're in a position to where you have to self-reflect and have to really dive into, why am I here? Why am I incarcerated now? What contributed? Now, I'm not saying that my the way I was raised as a child contributed to that. I'm not saying that at all.
I
I'm
understand that.
just saying that all of the expectations that society puts on women in general is too much. It's unrealistic to think that a woman can bear a child, take care of those children, get them where they need to be, still function outside of the home in the corporate world, trying to prove herself in the corporate world because she's a woman. All of those expectations. And then outside of that, just society in general. I think it's a lot. And for me personally, as I'm trying to grow as a professional and be a leader and be an executive, on top of all the other stuff on the outside from a homestead perspective, I think it takes its toll, and it did on me. And I was overwhelmed. I was making decisions that were not good for me, that were not good for my family. But I was I want to say basically in a desperate need, and didn't really know how to go about the right way of addressing those needs. And I got into trouble, and I was indicted for wire fraud. I was sentenced to 2 years in a federal minimum security facility, which is basically just a camp for women. And I spent 6 months in that facility from June of 2023 until December of 2023. And what I found was, during that time, it was actually the place for me to relax. Not, and I don't mean that in a vacation kind of relax. I just
of course not.
I mean a way to put all of the expectations from the outside world away, because I had none. I had no access to the outside world, no internet, none of that stuff. So it's just me, myself, and I, and the women that I am there with who have done similar or worse, things to get their self in that situation. But you start to reflect, and you start to, internalize and really dig out what happened. How did I get here? And that's when you really start to learn about who you are as a person, and realize that everything goes back to mental health. Everything.
It does. It does. Well, Tammy, what do you think? If you had to say now, of course, and I know we're going to talk about our programs a little bit at the end, but I want to kind of walk somebody down what it would look like. Because now here you are incarcerated, definitely not at a nice place. No access. And how was that guilt? I mean, I can imagine how you must be feeling, your family, your kids, everybody's that, and you can't even talk to them right now. Was there any guidance? Was there any counseling? Was there anything that you did maybe, or that was inside that helped a little bit with that?
From a program perspective and actually being there, no. Had I been able to have access to mental health support while I was there, I probably would have wanted to stay the whole entire, 12, 18 months, whatever it was, of my sentence, because I would have been receiving the care and the guidance and the rehabilitation that I felt that I needed. I asked for it, went through a small 2-day program, asked to continue, and was rejected. Being there really I had a lot of guilt. the day that my family dropped me off, and literally that's what it feels like, just like dropping you off at school. Because when you get there, you go in, you tell them who you are, you're there to self surrender, and they don't care. I mean, they have no regard for your family or what you might be going through at the time.
Right.
And my husband and my 2 adult children, my daughter who was 6-7 months pregnant at the time with their first child, and them having to leave me there was heart-wrenching. I mean, it was unlike anything I've ever experienced before in my life. And I'm sure it was for them as well, because they didn't know what was going to happen to me when I was there.
Sure.
We didn't know when I was going to get to come home. We didn't know when we were going to get to see each other again or even speak to one another again. But for me personally, the guilt that I was feeling and had been feeling for, quite some time, even before being incarcerated, that they now have to go navigate life without me being there to help support them, to help guide them, to give them direction, just to be there to listen to them. Now they're without that. So the guilt of
it's almost like a double guilt, a double guilt.
Yes, absolutely. So the guilt of all of that is just now on top of all the other stressors that, that I was carrying along the way. And there was no support for that, none whatsoever. And the only relief that I was able to get was to go to the library and find self-help books to help me understand what I was going through and to help me learn about my situation and how to change it and how to move forward. Because just like everything else in my life, you have to learn how to overcome, and you have to learn it on your own. So that's really what I did.
So now fast forward a little bit. Give us a little bit about what your stories were, what you went through, when you went, how long you were there. And then also, I know you told me that you had a chance to be able to work with some of the ladies inside. You already started the work that you're doing now inside.
Yeah. So while I was there, a lot of people, well, may not, but there's a program called the First Step Act and the Second Chance Act. And those programs are mandated programs by Congress to get people out of prisons and get them back into society. So if you do certain programming, you do certain things, you can earn good time credits to get out early for pre-release and get to go to, the halfway house or go to home confinement or, different variations depending on what your criminal activity was. And the First Step Act and their calculations were not right. They were not being used the way Congress had intended. They weren't being calculated correctly. So people were really staying in prison a lot longer than what was necessary and what the law provided us for. So having the ability to be able to understand that and know how to calculate those, those good time credits was important, and knowing when our home confinement date could be or a pre-release date could be. And, the case managers and the people there, they just went by the system. And if the system didn't tell them the date, they wouldn't know how to calculate it manually. So unless you had guidance and you knew how to calculate it, there was never a way of knowing when your pre-release date was, which means you could go to home confinement or you could go to a halfway house. There was no way of knowing that because they wouldn't tell you. They wouldn't tell you how to calculate it. They wouldn't tell you. So I figured it out and was able to help others calculate theirs. And that's when everybody started realizing they're keeping us here longer than what they need to be or what they should be according to the law. And, so we all started self-advocating, or not all of us, but those of us who knew how were advocating for our own benefit to get out of there and get at least closer to our family. And, people didn't know how to do that. They didn't know how to advocate. They didn't know how to go through administrative remedies to file that paperwork, to get them to be heard, because really that's all we wanted. We wanted to be heard. We want you to know that we know what we're talking about. We know these dates are right. We want to advocate for ourselves because we want you to listen to us. So I was helping, I don't know, I think probably 20 or 30 women fill out their administrative remedies, help them figure and calculate their actual release, pre-release dates, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I was really helping the women while I was there. And I don't think the administration really appreciated it too much. But I'm like, you know what? We're all here for the same reason, and that, you know, we're doing our time. We're doing well. Why are we not allowed to have our dates known? You know, that's all we're doing.
Right. So now it's ready to go. Your time is up. You have a choice. Talk to us a little bit about that journey. You have a choice. And you know, what is it? Is it going to the halfway house? Is it going to home arrest? You know, what was your choices and how did that feel? I mean, what was the program? What was the process for that?
Yeah, so it was a really long, drawn out process. The administrative remedies could take, you have to go through 3 different levels of administrative remedies. First is at the facility level, and that's like called an 8, a series 8, a form 8. And then you have to go through the 9, which goes to the director, and then a 10 and 11. So there's really 4 steps. And for time purposes, to keep us there longer, you know, they each got denied. So if one would get denied, then you'd have to file a 9. If that got denied, then you'd have to file a 10, which went to regional, which is outside. And if it got denied at the regional level, then you had to go to the headquarter level, which is in Washington, D.C. So the process for that whole entire administrative remedy process, it could take 4 months or longer, because you have to give them so many days within each one. And once it gets outside of the facility, then it takes even longer. So, you know, for me, I'm a first time offender. I'm nonviolent. I have, you know, never had any issues whatsoever. I could have been sent.
Let's just say low risk.
Low risk.
Low risk. Seriously.
Absolutely. So, and so were many other women in the facility that I was in. You know, several of us could have been sent to home confinement, put us on home confinement so that we could have had access to our family, been able to, you know, rehabilitate, have the support, have the resources that we needed in order to move forward. And not to mention that it would cost taxpayers a lot less money.
Yeah,
so,
I was going to say, exactly.
You know, so let's not forget that. But
drain on society. Yep.
Yeah. So technically, with the First Step Act, you're entitled, the first step and the second chance, you're entitled up to 12 months of pre-release. Okay. So that means 12 months from my actual release date. I really should have only spent about 2 or 3 months, 2.5 months in the facility itself. And then I could have come home and been on home confinement for the next, I don't know, 8 months, 12 months, whatever it was. But that's not the case. I had to fight for that. And I was fighting for it up until the day I was released in August of last year to finally get to come home. But I left the facility in Pekin, Illinois, and actually ended up at the Volunteers of America halfway house in Indianapolis. Now, that facility is, honestly, it's nothing more than I'm not even going to say a glorified babysitting service, but it's nothing more than a babysitting service for adults who do not need it. And some do, I'll give you that. Some do, but the women, very few, you know, very few of us needed that. But there was no reason really for me to be at that facility when I could have done the very same thing here at home and been on home confinement. And the resources and things that they were supposed to be providing for us at the halfway house were non-existent. For instance, when you go to the halfway house, their purpose is to prepare you to reintegrate into society, right? That's what a reentry facility is. And all they did was keep me there and keep me from seeing my family until I had a job. So the rules are, as long as you have a job, you can go home on the weekends and spend time with your family.
Okay.
but they don't give you the support and resources that you need to find that job.
Well, and I want to talk about this for just a second, because now we can get to the meats and the potatoes. It's like this. I know, I've worked with some of the parole officers. I've done some of the work days, the workforce days where people, the reentry, they come in and they're like, hey, what kind of jobs are there on the job board, right? But then I'm like, no, I can't. I've been there. I've been to Walmart. I've been to Wendy's. They don't hire anybody with a record. So you can't get a job at 99% of the places, so that you could go home and try to, go through the things, go through the steps to rekindle the love at your families, and try to repair yourself.
Yeah, for real. And, they're supposed to be providing you with the resources to create a resume, do job readiness training, such as interviewing skills, what to look for, how to search for a job, what job fits for you, where to look, what employer. I mean, none of that. They had a computer lab, but really all you could access was the internet. There was no access to a Word program or anything like that. They were supposed to be providing resources for you to assist in finding a place to live, by providing some sort of financial help with assistance in obtaining that, like deposits and utility deposits and things like that. But none of that. There was no help in researching and finding a place to live. Nothing. There was none of that. And again, the women that I'm with, some of them have been in prison for 10, 15, 20 years. And, they don't have the digital technology to know how to use it, much less use it in a proper way that helps them, reintegrate successfully.
Right.
So, fortunately for me, after about, 3 or 4 weeks, I was finally able to secure employment, ironically, with a reentry program here in my hometown that is transitional housing for men. And, so luckily I was able to find a job, but even prior to that, I feel like I'm educated enough that I can transfer my accounting skills to, and my leadership and management skills to, various fields. But I had applied for no less than 100 positions on Indeed over a week's time frame. And I had 3 employers that reached back out. Now, when I applied for those, my cover letter said I was very transparent. I was very open about my past and my history, explained to them, blah, blah, blah. And, that I was looking for an employer that would give me a second chance and, looking to, get back into the job market.
Right.
And I had 3 employers actually reached out. One of them hadn't read my cover letter or didn't receive it. Basically, all 3 of them did.
Right.
Was like that. So by the time I shared with them what my background was and that I had a history, and if they received my letter, crickets after that.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah,
after
of course.
that. So, for me personally, I'm like, if I cannot overcome this, or if this is hard for me to do, as a professional that has the resources and the means and the knowledge to be able to go about it the right way, how in the world would you expect these other women to overcome these barriers and be successful? You are just setting them up for failure to send them back.
And that's one of the things that's one of the reasons that I just became like such an advocate of it, which is yours and my you have a corporate background. I have a non-corporate background. But the thing of it is I'm a big believer of every single person deserves a second chance. And I don't care what your background is, what your education is. So I advocate to start businesses instead of staying in that minimum wage hellhole. And that's what happens, people. That's what happens. That's the truth. So when you cannot support yourself, what do? Well, you go back to the same bad habits that got you into incarceration to begin with.
Yeah, of course.
I want to talk about what we've learned, from your time in and my time working with Reentry. I want to talk about some of your programs and how you and I hope that we want to be able to make this a different place. somehow or another save a lot of economic development, a lot of resources in the community, and save a lot of lives, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've got, through living through all of this, and in reality, I am living the experience of reentry.
Right.
At the same time, I'm trying to develop a program that allows for others to not have to go through this. And that means breaking down walls and breaking down barriers and setting new pathways and standards and for reentry programs. And that is what my goal is. But my focus mainly is on women, because just like everything else in this world, the inequality in the treatment and the resources and services provided to women is almost non-existent. And especially here in Indiana, there are, I would say, maybe no more than a handful of facilities directly related to women and reentry and the programs that are needed. And what's different about the needs of women than men is the family dynamic. I'm not saying that men don't have that need, but we bared these children. They are our life. And we have a different perspective and a different need to reunify our family than what most men do. And in addition to that, you've got menopause, and you've got, all the other plethora of women issues and lifestyles that just need to be addressed differently than men. So women have the need to be empowered, to be who they are. They need to be given the strength and to the know-how to tap into that inherent strength and power to help them move forward. So that's what I hope to do with our program, in addition to all the other necessary wraparound services that our program is going to be able to offer. We're really going to have a special focus on women and how we help them to be self-sufficient, self-dependent, self-respected, and all of those areas that they were probably lacking prior to incarceration, and how to help them overcome that.
I want to also talk a little bit about, I've been on the board of services for abused families. I've been what stirred this passion up with me. God, I was in something that was Kairos Women's Prison Ministry. And I said, Lord, if anybody needs my programs, it's these people. So I got fortunate enough to be able to do a flagship program. And what I saw in these ladies' eyes for the first time was hope.
Yeah.
And talking to them, I also want to talk of the wraparound services and about just the slight differences between the men and women. Unfortunately, women end up with a lot of abuse situations. It could be mental abuse, physical abuse, drug abuse, and they've got this person that's on the outside that wants to control them. And without that proper training, without that confidence building, without that financial security, they'll end up right back in.
Yeah.
And that's what we need. Yeah. And that's why I love the programs that you're doing. I got to see your amazing, beautiful empowerment logo. I can't wait to help you build these programs out. I know that I think that what's going to be in our history, or it's going to be in our cards, is you and I doing like a workshop and having people come from Indiana to Chicago to Virginia and anywhere else around, because we want to show them how it should and how it could be.
Yeah. And, I think later down the road, what I envision is this isn't just a program for incarcerated women. This is a program for all women, and especially young girls, because we have to teach our young daughters, granddaughters, great-granddaughters, nieces, whatever. We need to teach them to be able to have that courage, to have that confidence, to have that self-respect, and set those boundaries so that they can avoid being in those situations and know how to get out of them even before they start. But it comes from confidence, and that 100%. Confidence and that courage comes from a different mindset and mental health. And if we can wrap all of those into one for a women's program, I think it's going to make a huge impact on just women in society as a whole.
I want to say one thing while we close up. Both you and I, I want to share something because we are out there fundraising, right? We have to pay for these services, but
Yes.
and I get some things on some of the grants. How many people does your program affect, right? How many people does it? But you know what, Tammy, and I'm going to share when I do my graphics, I'll share it with you. I'm building this out because it's a ripple effect.
Yes, it does.
One woman or one reentry person that goes back home and that can be financially independent, it's a ripple effect because their daughters, mothers, husbands, fathers, sisters, brothers are all affected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now they are all. So one person, I can tell you, I bet you, I'm going to do the research on it, but I bet you one person actually really affects 20 people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, me personally, I'm now back to the position where I'm trying to find another job. And the sad part is that if I don't find another job, they could violate me and send me back to be able to serve out the rest of my time. So if you want us to be sufficient and be, integrated into society successfully, then give us the resources, give us the services that we need in order to make that happen. And I think from a community perspective, it's about changing that stigma around what incarcerated people really does. What does that look like? What does that really mean? Yeah, it means you screwed up, you paid your price, and now it's time to rehabilitate and be put back into society. And the stigma within societies, we have to change that perception.
Yeah. 100%. I was just talking to a gentleman, I think on today, and it was like, hey, you know what? It's like this. The Bible says like what? Or sinning, all right? Who throw the first stone as somebody that did not sin, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody can sit there and look themselves in the mirror or say, Tammy, oh my gosh, how did that happen to you? How did you let that happen? No, we've all been there. And if you're not thinking that you've been there, well, then I don't know where you've lived, but you must have lived in a monastery and just birthed there because you didn't have any chances to do anything wrong. We've all done wrong stuff.
Absolutely. And and I know quite a few people that have thrown a bunch of stones at me, and some are, what I thought were my really close friends. And in fact, a couple of them were still my friends the day that I left. We had breakfast together, but within a short amount of time after I left, that all changed. So, society and the people you run around with definitely have influence on who you are, how you're perceived, and in all honesty, whether the rest of the community will accept you when you come back or not. And unfortunately, that's just another stigma and a mental health barrier that we have to overcome. And that's another reason for me putting this program together about women empowerment and, mental health, because I used to care what people think about me. I no longer care what people think about me. And that's what I want to instill in the women that we help.
I love it. Tammy, thank you so much. We are going to be putting all the things about your program, my program, in the show notes. And I love it. I love it. And you are definitely a hero. Thanks for attending the Hustle to Hero podcast.
Bye. Listen,
if you would like to be a guest on my podcast, and if you are somebody that's involved in the reentry community, if you're a veteran or first responder, please hit me up. And I would love, love, love to get you on my podcast. Bye for now.
Bye.